had posted a trailer on social media. It got passed around and ended up at UTA. If you had asked me like 3 months prior to that moment what I was going to do with the film, I don't know. I might just like post it on YouTube. Yeah, that would have been bad. A couple meetings later, I was signed at UTA.
CinePacks.
What is up, and welcome to the CinePacks podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Casey. I have my co-host, Andy Chin, here with me.
And today we're joined with Brian Tang, who's the visionary director behind Kodama and the Pod Racer short that you might have seen on YouTube, which is a Star Wars fan film. Welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, so I definitely want to chat about, I guess, let's take it from the beginning. Like, how did you get your, or where are you from? How did you get your start? Like, how did this all come to be?
All right, well, let's see. I don't know where to start because I feel like we could go back to like, I don't know.
Yeah, let's start from
where are you
Brian.
going? It's like I was born. No, I grew up in New Jersey. I did filmmaking up until high school, and then I went to USC Film School, and then after film school, I became a professional cinematographer who was working in the industry for a good long while. And then
you did film school in LA, or
I went to USC, yeah.
Yeah.
So LA, and I met a lot of really great people there. I definitely owe it to film school to having the community of people that I had.
Sure.
Not much else.
I mean, that's the question too. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of like anti-film school, camp of people versus like. I mean, like, do you think it was really beneficial because of the network and the people you kind of came up with?
I don't like answering whether or not film school is for you or not for you, only because I think it's about expectations.
Sure.
You think about what film school can offer. And for me, I went into it with kind of a naive mindset at the time. I was very much a gearhead. I was thinking about cameras. I was thinking about like, oh man, they're going to have gear like, we're going to have Alexas and Reds and film cameras and all that jazz, and they'll have sound stages and, fancy lights for us to play with. Yes and no, because the truth is it's not really about the gear. And even if it was, then the ultimate value that you get out of film school, depending on which one you go to, is really about the people that you meet there and the collaborators that you're going to become, that are going to become your future collaborators for years to come. So, you have this dream of going into film school thinking like, I'm going to exit film school with a portfolio of work that's going to get me on the next big, Marvel movie or something like that. But in reality, nobody jumps into a community or a you don't jump into a new like tier of filmmakers. You stay in the tier of filmmakers that you have created, the community that you have formed at film school, and you grow together. So, if your expectation going to film school is, I'm going to find a community of people, of like-minded individuals, then maybe that is right for you, and you can't access that kind of community elsewhere, then yeah, that might be worth it. But if it's just solely like gear or like access to like, certain networking things, I don't know. It's definitely dependent on where you go. It's definitely dependent on what kind of film school, but what's not dependent on which film school is the fact that you are going to be surrounded by like-minded individuals, and if that's worth it for you, then that's worth it. But if you can find that elsewhere, I mean, you can learn a lot of things online now.
Yeah.
Like, you can learn so much of the craft of filmmaking from the internet, and you get that for free. But what you can't get is the trust that you have from a fellow collaborator.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I think, I was just going to say, I do agree, because like when going into film school, if you're not really pushing, if you're not someone who likes to work with others, or, like making use of that community and like, I don't know, really just like I've went to film school for a minute, and you see some people who don't really want to be a part of that community or just go off and do things themselves. I feel like they're really not utilizing the main purpose of film school, which is really making connections and being with your peers.
And not thinking that connections are these lofty, like out of reach people. It's really the people that you're surrounded by and the friends that you make along the way and the connections that those form. Because, fresh out of film school, I think most, if not all my jobs were just born out of people that I met who were close friends of mine that were collaborators in and out of film school. And then B, it was people that they recommended me to. And it was always like a tangential like relationship from those that I met there.
Yeah, I guess going back to your story, so you went to USC and then you came out and you were working as a cinematographer. Like, how did you get those first jobs, or was cinematography like the main position you knew you wanted to get into when you first came out?
I definitely wanted to tell my own stories, but I think that fresh out of film school, it's very easy to sell yourself if you have a hard skill, something that people need always. And the job is already going to exist. The projects are out there. And as a DP, you kind of jump onto a train that's already moving with a project. And if you have a look, if you have something to say visually, then people will recognize that and they'll be able to kind of see their movie in your reel or in your work and look for a way of collaborating with you in that way. So I met a lot of people at film school that I continued shooting movies for, and there was a slew of directors who would consistently hire me as, I guess, I was their main DP. And I think that was like a really fruitful time for me as a cinematographer, because I think the barometer for whether or not you're being successful as a cinematographer is if you can confidently say that you have like at least 3 or 4 directors who will always reach out to you first.
And did you meet these guys through school too, or?
Most of them were from school, and eventually they branched off into those that I've met either through recommendation or somebody reaching out because they saw my work. And it's mostly through referrals.
Yeah.
Very rarely would those kinds of relationships form based off of somebody who just blindly saw my work over the internet. It was usually a recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's interesting because I feel like LA specifically is such a competitive like place for cinematography as well. Because I remember when I first moved here, like it was so hard to get jobs. Like I'll go on like Facebook, like I don't know, groups or answer, I don't know, even Craigslist ads and stuff for like people looking for DPs and stuff. And like in the Facebook like comments and stuff, you'll see people just throwing in their reels and everybody's just so good, right? So like, and it's interesting now, even like now, like most of the directors that I work with are like people from the Bay Area too. Like it's like connections that I've had, and like I guess word of mouth, like connections through other connections and stuff. And it's, yeah, I feel like just the value of just connections in your network is definitely really important.
And people aren't hiring DPs not just because they see a really good reel. They're hiring a DP because they know that they can trust that this person's going to be fun to work with or a good collaborator or is going to like allow me to do my job the way that I want to do my job. So I think that's why referrals are so important. And, any job that you're doing, no matter how small, being somebody who is pleasant to work with is so important.
I think that's definitely,
yeah.
If you're a photographer or filmmaker, you should definitely check out CinePacks lens filters. We have lens filters for photographers and filmmakers that offer unique in-camera effects. We have soft filters to give your photos that nice cinematic glow, as well as in-camera effects filters that can really level up your shot. Use promo code LENS15 at checkout and you're going to get 15% off your lens filter order. Now back to the episode.
Okay, so from you're doing cinematography out of school, so from there to Kodama, what's the story there?
There's a big jump there because honestly, I was very set on being a cinematographer for life, basically, for a while. And I think that was a big goal of mine. I was checking off all these boxes as far as DP like milestones go, like work with this kind of company, work with techno cranes consistently, use like Panavision glass or something like that, you know, like all those kind of surface level milestones or check marks that you can kind of like show off in a sense, but also kind of surface level in that it doesn't really mean anything beyond like, oh, I did that thing. You know, when it became really apparent to me that maybe my mindset could have been more suited for like, oh, I should be thinking more about what I'm making each time. Like I definitely felt very confident in like being a chameleon as a DP, finding the vision of the director, trying to interpret what the director is trying to do in a visual standpoint. But I guess curating the stories that I attached myself to was not apparent to me at the time. I would shoot anything and everything. And there was definitely a look that I was after, you know, each time. But the consistency of like curating like the kind of movies I would attach myself to only started really becoming a priority for me when I started learning 3D and animation, specifically Blender 3D. Pandemic hits, and we were all twiddling our thumbs at home and trying to figure out what to do. And I was very interested in 3D animation from like an early filmmaker standpoint. Like in high school, I opened Blender for like 3 days and then closed it after I gave up. I was like, this is too much. But what was different about then and now is that there is this insane influx of tutorial content online. There's almost no excuse. Like you just need to sit down in front of a computer and like learn the stuff. And it was really easy to digest because there's so many people making tutorial content online about Blender specifically. And this is around the same time that The Mandalorian just released their behind the scenes documentaries about the volume stages. And of course we have, you know, this new technology that was allowing people to both bridge the gap between cinematography, the cinematographers, and the, you know, the visual effects artists in the post houses and things like that. So that was just extremely inspiring for me to think like, oh, as a DP, because I was still in the mindset of like, I'm a lifelong DP, what is the next step for me to kind of, you know, reach out for those bigger projects, reach out for the projects that I ultimately want to be doing, you know? And I started realizing this might be the avenue to getting onto those kinds of projects, differentiating myself from those who may not have the skill set to understand the VFX world, or at least work on volume stages so that I can better utilize that technology in a way that might be useful for any story that I'm trying to tell for a director visually. And so I deep dived into Blender. I looked into Unreal at first, and then I realized, oh, I need to learn another program first before I can like learn Unreal. And so Blender was it. And I think because Unreal was a little bit newer of a concept on the internet's side of things at the time, I think Blender just had more tutorial content available.
No, definitely did. Yeah.
And and it just had like an update that was like big, and like the whole interface was different. So I just gravitated to Blender, and I found it to be kind of like the Swiss Army knife of all the 3D programs, and allowed me to kind of not just exercise like you know, obviously 3D animation and rendering and like lighting, but also start to notice like what kind of stories I wanted to tell and the consistency of like what kind of animations I would put out every day. Because I was trying to put out a piece of animation daily, more as a challenge to see if I could practice this in a more consistent way. And I found myself realizing like, oh, I really am drawn to these stories. I'm drawn to these kinds of concepts, and nobody else, no director is asking me to do this.
So you're just going to do it yourself.
So I'm just going to do it myself. Yeah. Kodama specifically was born out of getting really interested in Japanese folklore at the time.
I guess actually first, I guess for our audience who don't, I guess a lot of people haven't like seen Kodama because it's not public right now.
Right.
Maybe kind of give a brief intro on what Kodama is.
Kodama is a SWAT samurai action film that follows this guy named Arthur, who is a new elite SWAT samurai going in to rescue his father from evil Japanese folklore spirits, or vengeful Japanese folklore spirits. And it was a concept that was born out of me wanting to dive into Japanese folklore, an interest in samurai films, and also at the time I was kind of going through a shift in like how I saw my parents and the way that kind of dynamic changes as you grow older and like learn about like how to see your parents as peers and less so as like, you know, the adults in your life. And I felt like that was a story that I really wanted to tell and cram it into an action Japanese folklore action thriller.
But originally, so you made this so you can DP something like fully your style, fully the stuff that you want to do, and kind of just show people what you can do, essentially.
Yeah.
Like directing wasn't really even your goal at that time.
Yeah, no, actually that's a good point. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I was shooting at the time, I take great pride in, but I also recognize there was a lot of things that I personally desired to be shooting. I hadn't gotten a chance to do like a hard-hitting action film, and that was something that was a big desire of mine. I wanted to do something that was also like showcasing action in a beautiful light. You know, like the wire work that we see in Chinese kung fu movies, and but also like simultaneously like the tactical like choreography of those in like Sicario or even The Raid. And I thought those were movies that I just didn't have any collaborators that were interested in making that kind of stuff. And it felt like the only way I was going to be able to shoot that kind of stuff was to make it myself. And yeah, that's how the intention began. And then the further I, you know, immersed myself in the world, the further I immersed myself in the ideas and the ideals that I wanted to pull across on the screen, the more I was like, okay, I really need to tell this not just as like a project that I'm just going to shoot. It has to be a film that stands on its two legs. It's not just like a cinematography reel. It's not some sort of like piece that I'm going to showcase for like, but at the time I didn't know that. I just instinctually was like, okay, I'm going to make this thing. I want to make something that's fully me. How I'm going to release this, how people see it, I'm not even going to think about that right now. I just know that it's going to come out at some point, and I'll figure it out once I'm done and I have the thing in my hands, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like it's like, this is like, when I think of Kodama, it's like, I feel like it's the epitome of like a successful short film, because you guys crowdfunded it, right? Like it was a Kickstarter first. It was a successful Kickstarter campaign. You raised the money, you guys shot it, and then it played South by Southwest, was one of the biggest festivals, and then it got sold to Agbo, which is Russo Brothers. So they own the rights to it now, or they optioned it?
They optioned it,
to
yes.
make it into a feature. I mean, what was that whole process like from crowdfunding? Like, do you have any tips on like how to make a successful crowdfunding campaign, or like?
There's a lot of things that I had to learn real fast for crowdfunding and Kickstarter specifically. I think there's a tendency to think that Kickstarter, just because you have a Kickstarter, you don't have to do a lot of work. You do have to do a lot of work. And a lot of people talk about it being like a full-time job. It's like, it is true, because the most important thing, it's like, yeah, you can tell people about the Kickstarter, sharing it about, you know, like the whole month that you're going to be doing it for. We did it for 30 days. And you have to, okay, the biggest thing in making a Kickstarter work is moving that green bar to the end in a consistent manner. If you let like a significant, okay, let me back up. Kickstarter, people who see a Kickstarter, they want to know that this is going to be a successful Kickstarter. Everyone wants it to be successful because they're like, oh, it's a cool project. And I think, you know, I would be willing to put money in, but I don't want to be the first person to put money in. Right?
You want to join when the train's rolling.
I want to see that the train is already moving. I want to see that I'm just one of the people jumping onto the train. And the time in which you'll get the most donations is like the beginning and the very end. But you won't get the end donations if they don't think it's going to meet the deadline, right? So if you see the bar, if you see like a Kickstarter and you pull up a page and you look at the Kickstarter and you're like, oh, there's like 1 day left, but they're only 50% of the way there, you're not going to donate because it's like, there's no way you're going to raise 50% in 1 day. So the most crucial part of a Kickstarter campaign is right in the middle, to move that bar all the way to almost the end. Just so that people realize like, oh, this is going to be successful. My dollar is going to count. And, that's where all the tactics have to go in. Like you don't do all the campaigning like necessarily for the beginning. You do obviously, but like, you can't get lazy in the middle. That's the biggest, that's the biggest pitfall for most Kickstarters. Like if you let it like lag in the middle, then there's a 50-50 chance you'll make it.
So if it gets like 70% or somewhere like towards the end, is there the psychology there that people might be like, oh, I need to get this before it's closing, or, you know?
I think the magic of Kickstarter is that, you know, everyone knows that it's an all or nothing platform, and the time limit is very crucial. If you don't get it by this time, then you won't get any of the money. And and the other thing is like, if you want a really good spike in the beginning, you have to start advertising it before the campaign starts. So people know about it, and there's always this ticking time bomb in their mind going like, oh, this is the time to donate, you know, or if I don't donate today, then they're not going to make their goal. But that only happens in like the first half or the second, you know, the last half. And if you're trying to think about like tactics in the middle, the tactics are usually things like, we'll double the dollar or something like that. If you donate now, then like we have an angel investor or something like. When in reality, it's yourself.
Just asking your parents for the rest of the funds.
and it's really just kind of like all to make that bar move consistently.
Yeah.
Everything else is just kind of a fancy way of making that happen. But we ran a successful Kickstarter campaign, and I was super relieved because, to be honest, I was very nervous. I didn't believe that people would donate. I really didn't think that, like, I thought this was too much of an ask. And you know, the amount that we were asking for a short film was just like more money than I thought, you know, was possible.
Sure. And it was what, it was 30 grand or something?
It was
there?
40.
40?
About 40 grand. Yeah.
Okay.
And but you know, we were very thankfully supported by a lot of people, and not just friends and family, like people I didn't know. And I was, again, very surprised and grateful for those people to kind of hop in and realize like, oh, this is something worth putting money into. And the other tip though is like, don't make all your rewards like physical products, because then that becomes like an expense that kind of detracts from the amount that
takes out your budget.
Yeah. But anyways, Kickstarters, a lot of people talk about how you only get one Kickstarter in your life, or like one big Kickstarter. And yes and no. I mean, obviously it depends on who you think you're advertising to, but especially for film, I feel like nobody really gets to like go like donate for my movie, and then like a year later it's like donate for my movie, and then expect people to like continue
trying to pull favors like all the time. I feel like you can only kind of make big ass ones.
Kickstarter, like I think I pulled my one Kickstarter. Sure. You know,
I think it was a successful one, because then we played. I mean, you guys shot it and then played South by, and then through that you got your agent at UTA.
Yes. So it was kind of a interesting timeline because I submitted Kodama as a work in progress cut to South by Southwest. To my surprise, it got in. There was two things going against it. Obviously, I was like, oh, I don't really think of this as like a festival movie because I feel like most festivals don't usually go for this kind of stuff. But you know, South by, to their credit, was like saw something in it. The other thing was it was a work in progress cut. Like not all the VFX were in, and when I say not all the VFX were in, there was definitely parts of it where like there was like a temporary previs that was overlaid on top or something like that. And I was like, there's no way they're going to accept this. But they accepted it on a work in progress cut, which made me realize, oh, I have a month to finish this.
Oh my gosh.
Because the actual deadline to submitting the final file for the festival to screen was a month away. And that was when I really buckled down and was like plugging away at, you know, Blender and, you know, trying to composite all these set extensions in and all that jazz before the deadline. And I elicited I brought some people in to help me out and, you know, composite a few shots throughout. And yeah, we kind of like burned the midnight oil that whole month.
Crazy.
Trying to finish it. And at that time, once the lineup came out for what films were being screened at South by, and I had posted a trailer on social media, I guess it got passed around, the trailer, and ended up at UTA. And UTA reached out to me and literally it was like, yo, we want to see this film. And also, can we meet?
Nice.
And so a couple meetings later, I was signed at UTA. And this was before South by. Like
so you signed before.
I was yeah.
Okay.
And they were like, okay, we're going to bring this around town. And we're going to, we're going to show it to a bunch of people and see who's willing to, who's interested in turning this into a feature. And to my surprise, because I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to go to South by and I'm going to show this film and there's going to be a whole thing that I have to do. I asked them and it was like, what do I have to do at South by? And it was like, just have a good time. And I was like, oh, okay.
Like no meetings there, just
I mean, I guess, but like the truth is the hard part was technically over. Like trying to get a team of people together to help me kind of showcase this film to the right people. And it's interesting because if you had asked me like 3 months prior to that moment, what I was going to do with the film when it was done, I was like, I don't know. I might just like post it on YouTube and hope for the best. Maybe it'll get a few views. And yeah, that would have been bad because, or I would have been leaving it up to a lot more chance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it kind of goes to show the idea of like, yes, you can get a lot of views, or you can get the right views. You know, you can show the right people the film, and they will get you in the right rooms in order to make the project really work for you in your career. And you know, there's so many ways to go about it. You know, obviously going viral or showing the film on YouTube and having a lot of views is like kind of a catch-all for a variety of things. Like you can definitely get in the right rooms because of that, and the chances of it being seen by the right people are higher. But I don't know. I think that this was an avenue I didn't even know it was a possibility at the time. So I was really grateful when it happened. Yeah.
Sick. And then, so some of the scenes for Kodama was also with different pickups here on this stage. You want to talk about anything from that? Like, is there, I mean, was that part of the plan, or was that kind of like at what point did you realize you needed the pickups, and then kind of like, I guess, figuring out whether to do it on location or virtually, or just like full CG or like anything like that? Like, what was kind of thought process?
So for Kodama specifically, I knew that we were going to do pickups. I just knew that there was no way I was going to get everything I needed on the days of the shoot, because we were reducing it to like, oh, it's going to be 5 days. Oh, it's going to be 4 days. You know, like we just really wanted to spend the time that we needed, especially for the technical fight scenes and things like that. So I had planned ahead of time before we even shot anything that we're probably going to do a pickup shoot day. but how we were going to do that and in what way we were going to do it, I just didn't know. And the locations that we shot at were very expensive. The set dressing that we needed to do was also very costly. So doing pickups in like a rent the place again, redress it, was just kind of unwieldy and unnecessary at the time. So what we ended up doing was coming to CinePacks here and doing a virtual production of those key moments that I really needed to pick up. And these key moments were also by design, like just like looks or like close-ups or moments of somebody grabbing something and little connective tissue things in the edit that needed to happen in order for the fight scenes to make sense or for this like emotional beat to work. And so I don't know. I mean, like virtual production is like a really cool, flashy tool to like bring you into different worlds, but it's also really interesting as like a pickup, scenario.
Because I feel like that's something that we don't do too often, but I feel like that's such like a practical case use of it to just for locations like that where you have to dress up, like spend all this time and money to kind of just make it look like something, as opposed to getting plates on the day in case you might need to use it on the wall or something like that. I mean, in our case, we had you had all the Blender files that we kind of just transferred over. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's like something that people should utilize more often. I think using virtual production for pickups.
And for people who are planning ahead and they know that they're going to be using a space, depending on the space obviously, but like if they know that they're going to be back at a room or like a set that they built that they can't go back to, like it takes like 5 minutes to scan the room and then you can just throw it into Unreal and then suddenly you have the place
just
again.
Polycam it on your cell phone.
Super simple.
If you're an editor, you should definitely check out CinePacks' digital assets. They have thousands of effects that you can easily drag and drop into any editor, like Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere, After Effects, CapCut, the list goes on. And since you're listening to this podcast, use promo code POD20. You're going to get 20% off your digital asset order. And if you don't want to spend any money, check out the free samples because we have thousands of free sample effects that you can use in any project. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. And then, then there's a Pod Racer short, which that one, instead of going to film festivals, you decided to just drop on YouTube.
Yeah, no. So that was an interesting one because, okay, so this is also kind of backwards. So I made for fun a couple shots of a pod racer flying across a desert landscape. And, deep down, I've talked about like wanting to do a pod racing film at some point, but I have a love-hate relationship with fan films in general. I say that because I think fan films are a great place to showcase like technical ability and storytelling and all the above with any short film. But the thing that you don't get with fan films is the ability to sell it or the ability to like really do anything that's outside of like just like we made this and we're just going to offer it up to the internet for free. And because of that, it's usually hard for me personally to justify putting a ton of money into a fan film. And so in this case, I was like, I want to do this. I want to show that like I want to do a Star Wars movie. I want to do something that if I were to do a Star Wars movie, it would be probably in the realm of pod racing or something like that, because that's a deep interest of mine. But I wasn't really interested in doing a full-on, Kodama level like fan film. So what could that be? If I wanted to tell a story really effectively and keep costs low, it would probably be a trailer, and it'd be like 60 seconds max. And if I can tell the story in 60 seconds, I would be able to increase the production value per second, but also not have to spend a ton of money while the production value has been raised. So at least on that pragmatic like mindset, it was like, okay, we have our framework. We know what kind of style of short film trailer kind of vibe we're going to do here. And I was telling that to my team at the time, and then they had sent it to Lucasfilms, and they were like, "Oh, we want to meet Brian," and I was like, "Oh, I wanted to do this whole thing."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I don't know when the next time I'm going to meet Lucasfilms are, so I'm like, I might as well make this in the next 3 weeks before the meeting." And so I hit up a bunch of people, yourself included, and CinePacks in general, and I was like, I really want to do this pod racing thing. I hit up a friend of ours, Alan Stubbs, to make a pod racing cockpit, which he put together in like a week. And we shot it for one day, all on this LED wall. And yeah.
And he built that pod racer based off of the thing that you already made in Blender.
Yeah. So he based it off of a render that I did. I did like a 360 turntable type thing, so he could see all the angles of it, and he matched it perfectly. It's like he was finding pieces. He was kit bashing all these pieces of junk together and made it look exactly the way
I feel like that's like backwards of what you would think normally you would do, right? You would usually shoot the scenes and make the practical elements, and then add all the VFX and make a CG version of it later. But I mean, I think that's pretty crazy that you guys pulled it off like that. And then so all the scenes that were practical was shot here with the wall, and then I mean, it was like about 50% like VFX on the Blender side. Yeah,
I'd say so. So again, this is the same kind of methodology we had with the pickups that we did. Is like nothing's really going to be too much wider than like a medium shot. And we didn't need to, because we weren't playing out scenes fully. It was just a trailer, so we were going to cut really quickly. And
but the few wide shots that you did get were pretty amazing, though. I feel like we cut some of those into our reel. Where like AI generated the.
Okay. So yes, but very interestingly, like so the shot that Andy's talking about is a shot that we tried to get a wide shot of. It was like on Coruscant or something, and it was on Coruscant, and we had a living room set up, and the wall it wasn't necessarily big enough for me to like get as far back as I wanted to. So what we ended up doing was I generative filled like the set extension beyond the wall, and then because the AI imagery was just mushy and not really it didn't look good. Yeah. I put a bunch of vases to cover it up, CG vases to cover it up, and then I also projected it onto a piece of 3D geometry that kind of matched like the shape of the room, and I pushed in post. So it was a push in that didn't exist in the original footage.
Okay, so it was a static shot originally.
Yes.
You gen filled it, and then
you're pushing past the vases.
So you brought that as a plate into Blender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, crazy.
And then as long as you can do this with pretty much anything. You can kind of like project something onto 3D geometry, and then like as long as you're around the same axis of the original camera, you can do like lateral camera moves. But that's a trick from Ian Hubert, if anybody is interested in learning that.
Ian Hubert's crazy. Those tutorials are definitely pretty insane.
Yeah. And then what else? And then we had that meeting with Lucasfilms. They were really awesome. They loved it, and I think it did exactly what I was hoping. Just getting conversation started with them, and talking to them, having a great conversation with something to talk about. And, who knows if that'll turn into anything. It's not up to me.
Yeah.
But that was the end goal. And I think it was a really good time. And,
has anything come of it since, like that you've posted it online? And
not necessarily. I mean, honestly, it is okay in ways that I don't, things come of anything that you make, right? Like in ways that you don't realize or you don't expect. And I feel like the fact that the pod racing thing comes up quite often among different conversations is actually like it's probably doing more than I realize.
Sure.
And I also was really interested in putting something out that was really short and digestible and can be shared really quickly and easily. So I do think that it worked in that level too.
So if you had to do it again, you think that was a good move to do a fan film like that?
Yeah, I think that's like the only way to do a fan film.
Yeah.
Well,
or just as opposed to doing original content, the original short film that you can sell to the Russo brothers or whatever like that.
Well, yes and no, because I felt like I didn't need to do that anymore because of Kodama.
Yeah,
like
because you already signed, you already were meeting with studios and stuff.
Yeah. And I think Kodama was a demonstration of doing something that was holistically my own. And that was the project that deserved the most resources. And the pod racing one was kind of like a glorified sizzle reel as a director to a studio or anybody who's higher up that would see like, oh, this is his vision if given like a prompt, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then, so what's next? Like, what's in the horizon now that you're working on a script with the Russo brothers for the Kodama one for the feature?
We are working on a script with a writer, a very talented writer who is somebody who really like understands the world of Kodama. She is half Japanese. She understands yokai, and she has written on military type shows before. So that blend of the two is super important to me, and I think is key to making this film possible. Like it was interesting because working with Agbo and working with the team there, I've been learning a lot. This is all very new to me, the world of development and the world of working with screenwriters, and it's been just a giant learning experience. So far, I mean, I'm really enjoying it, and I feel like everyone's really aligned on the vision. And the more I talk about it, the more we get specific about things, the more I'm, just excited to share this when it comes out. But there's just a lot of steps between now and obviously rolling camera. So
yeah.
It's
probably gonna be like years still, you think? Or
yeah, I mean,
when we expect it?
It just feels like everything inevitably will take years.
Yeah.
And one has to learn to be okay with that and recognizing that this is worth the time that you spend. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure everyone's kind of familiar with the development process a little bit more than I am sometimes, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm coming from like a very technical, origin of being a cinematographer, but also like, I guess re-sparking a lot of the intentions I had as a filmmaker before I committed to that.
Yeah. Okay. So then, so now I guess when you signed to UTA, was that the moment you decided, to switch gears? Like, oh, now I'm going to focus on directing?
Yeah, honestly, that was a big moment for sure. It was after finishing Kodama where I was like, okay, yes, I do have a lot of stories I want to tell, and there's a perspective that I personally feel like I would want to share, that I think is worth sharing. And I think that I fell into directing in a way that was authentic to me. I think some people or other people or anybody else would really have a different perspective on how they go about directing. But for me, it was just, if it takes me to direct this for this movie to exist, then so be it.
Sure.
And ideally, okay, so rephrase. If it takes me directing this to have this movie exist the way that I see it could potentially exist, then like so be it. And I just want to be serving a project in order for it to become a reality. And so when I started seeing things from that perspective, I think it became very clear to me. I was like, oh yeah, I think that is directing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I still shoot things. I still DP things. And I've been working a lot with this company called Impossible Objects that does a lot of virtual production. So I've been in the commercial space as well. And they do a lot of virtual production that is related to, everything from full CG spots to automotive spots to just, virtual production related things like on a volume wall and stuff like that. So that's also a space that has allowed me to kind of exercise those directing muscles or, other things that is related to.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, tips or anything for like aspiring filmmakers that kind of want to do what you're doing?
Tips.
Or advice or anything?
I guess the goal would always be to think of what you do as like an offering to a bigger thing, something bigger than yourself. 'Cause I feel like that's always been the only way I felt like this is sustainable. Like if you're making something and you get to make something that like contributes to, the culture of films, then that feels like, I don't know.
Worth it?
It feels worth it. It feels like time well spent, and it does clarify what you want to say as a filmmaker, or if you even have something to say as a filmmaker. And I don't know. I think it's hard to do this without having a sense of like, what am I doing this for? So if you can see yourself being somebody who serves the medium and thus serves a project in recognizing what's best for this project, then I think things get really clear. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, super stoked that you're here. Is there anything you want to plug or any like social media tags or anything like website that you want people to check out?
I guess, I'm on Instagram and I have, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to say to that.
Put the Instagram down below.
Yeah, we can put it in the description and stuff.
Yeah.
Link to the trailer.
Yeah, the trailer for both. Because the Kodama trailer is out.
Yeah.
And the pod racing trailer is out. But the full thing, you're not releasing anytime soon?
That is to be decided exactly when.
Probably after the feature is out.
I don't know.
That's
definitely a discussion that I have to figure out with those.
So I think that's what they did with the Paramount movie Smile. Like they did because I had a similar story where they played South by, then they made it into a movie, and then they released the short like after the movie was out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember that they posted that on the Paramount the YouTube channel or something.
All right.
That was cool.
Cool.
Sick.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.